Aki Tomoya was cycling to deliver his last newspaper of the day when suddenly he saw a white beret flying in the wind. He quickly pedaled to chase after it, and when he finally caught it, he looked back to see who owned it. There stood a beautiful young woman gazing at him. And with that, his fate in this spring season began. The alarm in Tomoya's room rang, prompting him to get up and prepare to head out, but not before he greeted the anime poster on his wall. He set off to deliver newspapers early in the morning, greeting his neighbor who subscribed to the paper. His neighbor asked if Tomoya was now a paperboy and what had happened to his previous job. Tomoya replied that he was still working at the rental store and the restaurant, he just wanted to add a morning job as well. The neighbor praised Tomoya for being so diligent and asked if it was difficult for him to balance work with school. Tomoya admitted he could manage it, especially since he had a big goal he was working toward. Wasting time wasn't an option, so he bid farewell and went on his way. His neighbor wondered what anime Tomoya was currently obsessed with. This morning marked the first day of the new school year at Toyobasaki Private Academy. Sawamura Spencer Ariri was looking at the announcement board of the class lists. All her friends greeted her. This year, Ariri was in Class 2G with Kyo Isumaki and Azusa Satomi, and she was glad to be in the same class as them. Suddenly, she noticed a girl arriving, staring at her even as she passed through the school gate. Tomoya was in Class 2B this year, and he was once again in the same class as Kamibu Yoshihiko. Yoshihiko greeted him, but Tomoya asked him not to bother him because he was busy. Yoshihiko guessed that Tomoya must be compiling info on winter anime or reviewing the light novel released last March. However, it turned out Tomoya had already completed that. He had summarized the anime within 24 hours of the final episode airing, reviewed the novel 3 days after its release, and had even completed the game review. Tomoya's mission was to provide helpful news without spoilers, allowing his readers to enjoy it fully. Yoshihiko called Tomoya a unique kind of blogger and asked what he was working on now. Tomoya explained that he had an important mission, a masterpiece project that would be the beginning of an otaku's life. Just then, Yoshihiko froze, staring out the classroom window, and urged Tomoya to look too. Tomoya was annoyed by Yoshihiko's sudden distraction just after he'd answered his question. But Yoshihiko was watching Ariri. She was a half-Japanese, wealthy girl whose father was a British diplomat. What's more, she was the star of the art club, and her artwork had even been accepted for the city art exhibition right after she enrolled here. Tomoya asked why Yoshihiko was so interested in her, and Yoshihiko said Ariri looked even more charming this year. Tomoya asked if Yoshihiko still liked three-dimensional girls, especially when Tomoya himself had already committed to two-dimensional girls. But Yoshihiko pointed out that Ariri was every bit a moe heroine with her pale skin, blonde twin tails, and knee socks, the ideal dream girl from any two-dimensional game. Tomoya replied that three-dimensional girls were just too much trouble. Yoshihiko suggested they go to the opening ceremony together, but Tomoya told him to go ahead. He'd catch up later. Ariri went to her locker and opened it to get her comic, only to hear Tomoya call her careless, saying she usually did miss limited editions. Tomoya informed her that online stores had long since stopped taking orders and that he had pre-ordered from every store that offered exclusive products. Ariri reminded Tomoya not to talk to her at school. Tomoya responded by asking if that was any way to treat the guy who had carried 5 boxes, each weighing 1.8 kilograms, around Akihabara on release day for her. Ariri replied that she'd already given him a bonus poster and said it should be Tomoya thanking her. Then she asked why he was in Class G when he was actually a Class B student. Tomoya was surprised she knew his class placement, considering it had just been announced today. Embarrassed, Ariri said she'd leave if Tomoya didn't have any other business with her. Tomoya called out to her, saying he wanted to talk about something important. However, the opening ceremony was about to start, so Ariri reminded him of that. Tomoya insisted it would be better to say it now, practically begging her to listen. He started telling her about his project plan. Curious, Ariri asked why someone like Tomoya would have such a ridiculous and painful idea. Tomoya was thrilled. She asked and explained that a week ago, he'd experienced a life-changing moment. He described feeling something in his hands that he could only call destiny or maybe even a miracle. He said it felt like a scene from a shoujo manga, a romantic anime, a moe light novel, or the prologue of a dating sim. However, Ariri replied that she had seen that kind of thing a million times and was already tired of it. Tomoya explained that this formula for success worked well and was popular, so he wanted to pour his feelings into it. Ariri asked if Tomoya wanted to make a game that told the story of his encounter with this girl. Tomoya said that when he saw the girl, he could already envision the text and music, almost like it was playing in his head. That was when he realized the only way to tell the story was through a game. Ariri questioned why Tomoya hadn't just chased after the girl and confessed his love. Tomoya countered by asking why he bothered confessing to a three-dimensional girl. Frustrated, Ariri asked if he really wanted to drag her into his little fantasy world. Tomoya pointed out that Ariri was the best illustrator he knew. By day, she was the pride of Toyogasaki Academy's art club, but by night, her secret otaku identity was as the popular 18-plus doujinshi artist known as Egoistic Lily or Kashiwaji Eri. Annoyed, Ariri reminded Tomoya not to use that name at school. Tomoya asked if she considered working on the project, but Ariri declined. Then Tomoya reminded her of the promise they made in grade school. Back then, Tomoya had told her that one day he would be the director of a game company, and when that day came, he would hire her. Ariri had said she would wait for him no matter how long it took and become an artist for his game company. With a toss of her hair, Ariri brushed it off, saying no grade school kid makes a future promise with that much detail. Ariri told Tomoya that if he was really serious about his project, he should be creating the illustrations and script himself, since that's what true doujin artists do. Tomoya said there's no way he could do that, as he'd never be able to capture the girl's beauty, not in a million years. Intrigued, Ariri asked just how beautiful this girl really was, but Tomoya replied that the scene was still etched into his memory. He described her in a white dress and beret, standing on a hill, surrounded by cherry blossom petals blowing in the wind. Ariri pointed out that Tomoya's words didn't give any details about her face. She was sure he couldn't even remember what the girl looked like. Tomoya replied that his feelings weren't about capturing some perfect image. He said he didn't want to lessen her beauty with his attempts. He needed Ariri's illustration skills for that. Frustrated, Ariri tore up Tomoya's project proposal, saying that his thinking was shallow. Tomoya was stunned that a doujinshi artist would say something like that. Ariri argued that if this was supposed to be his grand project and he'd forgotten such a key element, then it was obvious he wasn't serious about it. She called him a fake producer, just looking to take advantage and enjoy the results without real dedication. Tomoya insisted he wasn't half-hearted, he was passionate, filled with ideas, and driven to bring this project to life. Ariri, unimpressed, questioned whether all his ideas fit on a single piece of paper. She suggested it was probably just a simple plot about a boy meeting a mysterious girl, getting close to her, kissing, and then ending it. She scoffed that his so-called unique vision could be summed up in a single sentence. Ariri walked away, ignoring Tomoya's pleas to hear him out. He told her he'd be waiting in the AV lab after school, but Ariri replied it was far too late for him to convince her now. During the opening ceremony, Yoshihiko noticed how dejected Tomoya looked and asked if he'd been rejected by a girl on the first day of school. Tomoya denied it, saying he was just dealing with a major crisis between him and his fresh start as an otaku. But, as usual, Yoshihiko wasn't really listening. Instead, he pointed out a girl named Kosumigoka Utaha. She was the smartest student in the school, ranking number 1 in her class for 2 years straight. Rumor had it that she lived in her own world, always slept in class, and never did her homework. Yet no teacher dared to scold her. Tomoya called Yoshihiko out for acting like he knew Utaha when he'd never actually met her. Utaha was indeed gorgeous and widely considered one of the 2 most beautiful girls at Toyogasaki Academy. Some people even said she was the dark side to Ariri's light side. Tomoya warned Yoshihiko that comparing Ariri and Utaha like that could come back to bite him. Still, Yoshihiko pressed on, saying Utaha had long black hair, a great figure, and wore black stockings. She was practically the perfect moe heroine to rival Ariri. But Tomoya insisted Yoshihiko stop judging them purely based on their appearances. Yoshihiko conceded it was odd that neither girl was ever seen hanging out with guys despite all the admiration they got. He figured they either knew how to hide it well, or maybe they actually dislike men. Tomoya told Yoshihiko not to ask him about it, but Yoshihiko laughed it off, saying he should have known better than to discuss it with Tomoya, the guy who only liked two-dimensional girls. After school, Tomoya met with Utaha, bringing her lunch since he knew she probably hadn't eaten yet. He asked if he could sit beside her, but Utaha just stayed silent and nudged him with her foot as a sign to open her lunchbox. She started eating with enthusiasm and then began asking questions, though her voice was barely audible. Tomoya handed her a drink. When she finished eating, Utaha said it must be because he wanted a favor that Tomoya was willing to show up in front of the woman he long discarded. Tomoya asked her not to say things that could give people the wrong idea and asked for her thoughts on his project plan. He admitted he'd never written a script before and would really appreciate her feedback. He then asked for an even bigger favor, saying he'd be thrilled if Utaha would join the whole project. Utaha's reaction, however, took him by surprise. She immediately crumpled the project proposal paper, saying, "Trash is trash, filth is filth, and ashes remain ashes." Tomoya was shocked, especially since he'd written the proposal with all his heart. Utaha told him that his misguided passion, his blatant naivety, and even his perseverance didn't match up to the appeal of his own name. She wasn't willing to give feedback on something she found unworthy. Tomoya asked if his project was really that terrible. Utaha gave a score of 0, saying parts of it were muddled, predictable from the story and source material alone. The worst part, she added, was that the content wasn't even on par with a pirated copy. She told him that what she'd read so far had left her completely disappointed. Tomoya couldn't believe Utaha thought so poorly of his project. She also said she was too busy to indulge in Tomoya's fleeting desire to start a game production studio. Tomoya insisted it wasn't just a whim. He'd always wanted to make games. He wanted to match, even in some small way, the game creators he admired. He reminded her that Utaha had once suggested that he might or might not have what it took to be a game creator. Utaha didn't remember ever saying that and accused him of trying to change the subject with some underhanded flattery. Tomoya was frustrated with her, especially knowing Utaha was the top student at Toyabasaki Academy and actually the famous high school novelist Kasumi Utako, the author of Koizuru Metronome, which had sold over 500,000 copies. Utaha said that since Tomoya knew who she really was, he should know she was very busy. Tomoya mentioned he knew she recently started a new series and congratulated her on it. She thanked him and started to walk away. Tomoya kept pleading, asking Utaha to meet him in the AV lab after school. Utaha, however, couldn't help but regret that he was only asking for her help now. Tomoya continued working on his project proposal, then headed out to meet Ariri and Utaha. Suddenly, Kato Megumi called out to him, saying that Ms. Asumi asked him to come to the teacher's room to help carry teaching materials to the AV lab. However, Tomoya replied that he couldn't go right now because he had something important to do and that he would take care of it early tomorrow. Megumi then thanked him for retrieving her white beret that had fallen during spring break. Tomoya didn't remember this immediately, since it had been a few days, but then he realized who she was. Meanwhile, Ariri was waiting in the AV lab. Hearing a noise inside the room, she said that she came not because she agreed with Tomoya's request, but simply because she'd lose sleep if she didn't settle things. Utaha responded by praising her sense of duty, surprising Ariri, who didn't realize Utaha was there. Shocked, Ariri yelled, ran up to her, and asked why she was here. Utaha shot back with the same question, asking why Ariri was there. Ariri guessed that Tomoya must have asked Utaha to come as well. Utaha admitted that she felt something was off when Tomoya mentioned wanting to make a game, but she hadn't expected him to ask Ariri to do the character designs. Not wanting to be outdone, Ariri shot back that Tomoya had asked a gloomy girl like Utaha to write the script. Utaha smirked, sarcastically wondering if it was wise to trust the illustrations to a delinquent who acted like a perfect young lady on the outside but was rotten on the inside. This infuriated Ariri, who insisted she wasn't a delinquent, while Utaha admitted she might be gloomy, but at least she was more honest with herself than Ariri. Ariri warned Utaha to stay away from Tomoya, accusing her of just latching onto him because he reached out. Utaha countered, saying Ariri had no right to talk since she was doing the same thing. Angered, Ariri stated that she'd actually come to stop Tomoya because she didn't believe his crazy project would succeed. Utaha casually remarked that if Ariri felt that way, maybe she shouldn't have come in the first place. Deciding to leave, Ariri asked if Utaha was planning to stay and entertain Tomoya's wild fantasies. Tomoya interrupted, saying it wasn't Ariri's concern. Realizing Megumi was the girl he met in the spring, Tomoya went back to her to confirm. Megumi clarified that they were in the same class. Tomoya, still confused, asked if her name was Kanu Megumi, but she corrected him, saying her full name was Kato Megumi.